I found the envelope on a Wednesday morning, wedged between a past-due electric bill and a coupon for a grocery store I could no longer afford. My hands were still rough from the night shift at the warehouse, 12 hours of loading freight onto pallets for $11 an hour, and they trembled slightly as I held it. The return address was a law firm in Houston. I almost threw it away. I'd gotten enough letters from lawyers over the past 3 years to last a lifetime, and none of them had ever brought good news. But something made me open it. I read it twice, standing in the parking lot of my apartment complex in Beaumont, Texas, the August heat pressing down on me like a physical weight. Then I sat down on the curb because my legs stopped working. 2 years ago, I was the co-owner of Reeves Energy Solutions, a drilling equipment company my father built from nothing in 1971. We had 43 employees, contracts with 4 major oil producers, and a reputation in Southeast Texas that took 50 years to earn. I had a corner office, a truck that wasn't held together with rust and prayer, and a daughter who still called me every Sunday. I thought I had built something that would outlast me. I thought I understood the people around me. I was wrong about almost everything. But I'm getting to that. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 62 years old, and 3 years ago, my brother took everything my father ever built and handed me nothing but debt and silence. My daughter stopped returning my calls. My health started going. I moved into a 2-room apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cigarettes, and I told myself every single morning that I would find a way through this. There were mornings I didn't believe it, but my brother made one mistake. He underestimated the one person in our family who still had a conscience. And that's where this story really begins. My father, Raymond Reeves, came to Texas from rural Mississippi in 1965, with $40 in his pocket and a mechanical aptitude that bordered on supernatural. He could fix anything with an engine. He took a job at an oil field supply warehouse in Beaumont, worked his way into the maintenance crew, and by 1971 had saved enough to start his own small operation repairing and refurbishing drilling equipment. He named it Reeves Energy Solutions because he always said he wanted the name to mean something beyond just one man. My brother Gary and I grew up in that company the way other kids grew up on farms. We worked summers from the time we were 12. We learned the equipment, the customers, the rhythm of the oil industry. When we graduated from Lamar University, me with an engineering degree, Gary with a business degree, we both joined the company full-time. Dad had built it for both of us. He said that often enough that it became part of who we were. This is yours, boys. Both of yours. Don't ever forget that. For 25 years, it worked. Gary handled the business side contracts, finances, client relationships. I handled operations, the shop floor, the equipment, the crews. We were different men who needed each other, and we both knew it. That's what I thought, anyway. Dad had a stroke in 2019. A bad one. He survived, but he was never the same after slower, quieter, easily confused. He updated his will that fall, in the presence of a lawyer I'd never met, and Gary drove him to the appointment. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Dad had always been organized about his affairs. I assumed he was simply making sure everything was in order. I assumed a lot of things I shouldn't have. Dad died in March of 2021, peacefully, in his sleep, at 78 years old. We buried him in the same cemetery as our mother, under a Texas sky that seemed impossibly blue that day. I stood at his grave and thought about all the things I'd meant to say to him and hadn't. All the times I'd assumed there would be more time. The reading of the will was 2 weeks later. I drove to the lawyer's office expecting to walk out a co-owner of a company worth roughly $9 million. That's what Dad had always intended. That's what he had said, plainly and directly, at every family gathering for 30 years. The lawyer read the document. Raymond Reeves had left Reeves Energy Solutions, in its entirety, to Gary. I was left a cash bequest of $50,000 and a personal note from my father that said he loved me and was proud of me and hoped I would understand. I didn't understand. I still don't entirely understand. But I've pieced enough together over the past 3 years to know what happened. Gary had driven Dad to that lawyer's office. Gary had sat in the room while the new will was drafted. Dad was 77, recovering from a stroke, and not always lucid in those final months. There were days he called me by his brother's name. There were days he forgot what year it was. Gary knew that. Gary had always been the one to drive him to appointments, to manage his medications, to be the son who was present and nearby and helpful in all the ways that looked like love and might have been something else entirely. I don't know exactly what was said in that lawyer's office. I never will, but I know my father. I know that a man who said this is yours, both of yours, for 3 decades, didn't change his mind at 77 out of nowhere. My lawyer told me I had a case. Undue influence, possibly. Diminished capacity. But cases like that take years and cost money I didn't have. And Gary had access to the company accounts to fund his defense, and I had $50,000 that disappeared in the first year of legal fees before my lawyer finally told me, gently, that we were unlikely to win. Gary never said a word to me directly. Not an explanation, not an apology, not even an acknowledgement that what had happened was unusual. He sent a letter through his lawyer informing me that my position at the company would be terminated effective immediately and that I should vacate my office within 5 business days. 25 years. And a letter through a lawyer. My daughter, Melissa, was 34 at the time. She'd grown up close to her Uncle Gary, spent summers at his house, thought of him as family in the truest sense. When the dispute began, she asked me to explain what happened, and I told her what I believed that her uncle had manipulated her grandfather during a vulnerable period and rewritten his legacy for his own benefit. She didn't believe me, or she couldn't. Maybe it was easier to think her father was bitter, and her uncle was simply fortunate. Maybe loyalty to one of us felt like a betrayal of the other, and she chose the one who hadn't made her choose. She stopped returning my calls around Christmas of 2021. A text message on my birthday that year, thinking of you, and then silence. Silence for nearly 2 years. I tell you all of this so you understand where I was on that August morning when I opened the envelope in the parking lot of my Beaumont apartment complex with trembling hands. I was 61 years old. I was loading freight at night for $11 an hour because my body wouldn't hold up to the day shift anymore. My right shoulder had been wrong since a fall in the warehouse 8 months earlier. I never saw a doctor because I couldn't afford the copay, and there were nights when the pain woke me at 3 in the morning and I lay in the dark doing the math of my life and coming up short every time. The note inside the envelope was handwritten. That surprised me. In my experience, lawyers don't handwrite things. Mr. Reeves. My name is Sophie. I'm Gary's daughter. I'm 23 years old, and I work at my dad's company now, in accounting. I found something you need to see. I've been trying to decide what to do about it for 6 months. I've decided I can't stay quiet. Please call me. Please don't tell my dad I contacted you. I sat on that curb for a long time. The sun climbed. A neighbor walked past with a small dog and looked at me the way people look at someone they're not sure is all right. I called Sophie that afternoon. She answered on the second ring, and the first thing she said was, "Uncle Danny, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it took me this long." We met in person 3 days later, at a diner halfway between Beaumont and Houston. She looked like her mother, dark hair, careful eyes, but she had Gary's jaw and my father's hands, those long, capable fingers that I'd watched repair engines and sign contracts and hold grandchildren. She was nervous. She kept checking the door. She had brought a folder. I need to explain what was in that folder carefully, because it took me several weeks and a new lawyer to fully understand it. But the short version is this. Gary had not simply rewritten Dad's will. He had been systematically redirecting company funds into a separate LLC for at least 3 years before Dad died. He had inflated equipment maintenance contracts, created invoices from vendors that didn't exist, and skimmed the difference into accounts that Reeves Energy Solutions' regular bookkeeper would never see because Gary had hired a second bookkeeper, an old friend, to manage the secondary ledger. By the time Dad died, the company that was worth $9 million on paper had roughly $4 million less in actual liquid assets than the books showed. Gary had, in effect, already taken his inheritance before the will was ever changed. The will change was insurance. A way to keep me from looking too closely. Sophie had been in the accounting department for 7 months when she started noticing discrepancies. She was 23 and new, but she was also the granddaughter of Raymond Reeves, who had taught his grandchildren the same thing he'd taught his sons. Numbers don't lie, but people make them try to. She had spent 6 months building the case quietly, carefully, saying nothing to her father, living in his house and eating his food and carrying the weight of what she knew. I asked her why she finally decided to come forward, and she looked at me across the diner table with her grandfather's eyes and said, "Because Grandpa worked his whole life for that company, and what Dad did to you is wrong." And I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. She was 23 years old. She was braver than anyone I knew. The new lawyer I hired had a different temperament than my first one. She was methodical and unhurried, and she looked at Sophie's folder for 45 minutes without saying anything. Then she looked up and said, "This is enough. I won't walk you through every detail of what followed, because the legal process is slow and complicated and not the part of this story that matters most. What matters is that the forensic accountant confirmed Sophie's findings. What matters is that when Gary's lawyer was presented with the evidence, the conversation about settlement began almost immediately. What matters is that Gary, faced with the choice between a courtroom and a negotiated resolution, chose the latter. Reeves Energy Solutions was restructured. I was restored as a co-owner, with a buyout option if Gary and I determined we could not operate the company together, which we both knew before the ink was dry. The financial irregularities were addressed. Gary kept his personal assets, avoided criminal prosecution by the narrowest margin, and agreed to a settlement that gave me enough to rebuild. I am not a vindictive man, or I try not to be. I don't take pleasure in what happened to my brother. He has 2 grown children, a marriage that I suspect will not survive what's come to light, and a reputation in the Southeast Texas business community that he will spend years trying to repair. He took something from me that I will never entirely get back: 3 years of my life, my health, my relationship with my daughter. No settlement reverses that. But I'm getting ahead of myself again, because the settlement is not the ending of this story. The ending, the real one, happened on a Tuesday in November, 4 months after Sophie sent me that envelope. I was sitting in the new lawyer's office in Houston, signing the final documents, when my phone buzzed. A text message from a number I hadn't heard from in nearly 2 years. "Dad, it's Melissa. Sophie called me. She told me everything. Can I come see you?" I excused myself from the conference room and stood in the hallway and did not try to compose myself, because I was 61 years old and my daughter had just called me Dad in a text message after 2 years of silence, and I was not going to apologize for crying in a law firm hallway. I typed back, "Yes, please, whenever you can." She drove from Dallas that weekend. 4 hours, door to door. She pulled up to my apartment, still the Beaumont apartment. I hadn't had time to find anything else yet, and when I opened the door, she looked at me the way a person looks when they're seeing the damage they didn't know they caused. The lines in my face, the shoulder I was still favoring. The apartment that was nothing like the home she'd grown up in. "You look tired, Dad. It's been a long few years." She stepped forward and put her arms around me, and I cannot tell you that I was dignified about it. I was not. I held on to my daughter in the doorway of a bad apartment in August heat, and neither of us said anything for a long time. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and tried to laugh and said, "I should have called sooner. I should have. I kept thinking that if I stayed out of it, it would resolve itself, and You don't need to explain." "I do. I owe you an explanation, Dad. I chose wrong, I chose easier." I pulled her inside. I made coffee on a machine I'd bought at a thrift store. We sat at a table with 2 mismatched chairs, and she told me about the last 2 years of her life, a promotion at work, a relationship that ended, a friend who had gotten sick, and I told her about mine, the warehouse nights. The shoulder, the way I had learned to cook simple things well, because it was one of the few things I could control. She laughed when I told her I'd become genuinely skilled at cornbread. "Mom's recipe?" she asked. Her mother had been gone for 8 years. The cornbread recipe had been written on an index card in that same worn handwriting that appeared on birthday cards and grocery lists and every important document of my childhood. "I found the card in a box when I moved," I said. "I'd been making it wrong for years." Turned out I'd been putting in too much buttermilk. Melissa smiled. "A real one, not the polite kind." "Dad." She left me 3 copies of that recipe. She said she didn't trust you to hold on to the original. I laughed. The first real laugh I could remember in longer than I wanted to admit. She stayed for 2 days. We drove out to the cemetery on Sunday morning. The 3 of us, in some sense, Melissa and I at my parents' graves, the same way I used to stand there when she was small and I would try to explain death to a child who couldn't understand it yet. We didn't say much. Some places don't need words. On the drive back, she said, "Sophie is something else." I called her to yell at her, honestly. When she first reached out, I thought she was taking your side just to, I don't know. I thought it was complicated. But she just said, "It's not complicated. What Dad did was wrong, and I know it, and I can't pretend otherwise." She's 23. I'm 36, and it took me 2 years to get there. She looked out the window. The flat Texas landscape moving past us, the sky enormous and pale in late autumn. "Grandpa would have hated this," she said quietly. "He would have been so angry at what happened." "I know. He loved you, Dad. I know that." "I know he did. I've thought about that a lot since then, what my father would have wanted, what he would have said. I think about the stroke that changed him and the months that followed in the lawyer's office I was never invited to. I don't think he understood what he was signing, not fully. I think Gary sat beside him and guided him through it with the patient expertise of someone who had been preparing for years, and I think Dad signed because he trusted his son and his mind wasn't what it once was. I don't blame my father. I've worked hard at that, and I believe I've gotten there. He loved us both, in the way that fathers love children imperfect, assuming, sometimes blind to what's right in front of them. He thought he had time to fix things. He always thought there was more time. It's been 14 months since the settlement. I'm 62 now, living in a proper house outside of Beaumont, nothing extravagant, 3 bedrooms and a yard that needs attention, and a porch where I drink coffee in the mornings and watch the light change over the flat horizon. My shoulder is better since the surgery I could finally afford. I sleep through most nights. The buyout option from the settlement gave me enough to start over in a way I hadn't let myself imagine during those warehouse years. I'm not wealthy. I'm comfortable, which is a thing I once took for granted and now understand as the profound gift it is. I do some consulting work with smaller drilling operations, the kind of work that uses everything I know without requiring me to pretend I have the energy of a 40-year-old. It's enough. More than enough. Sophie left the company 4 months after the settlement. I don't think Gary made her life easy in those final months. She took a job with an accounting firm in Austin, and she's good at it, her supervisor tells her, because she has an instinct for when the numbers are trying to hide something. I take full credit for that, or rather I give the credit to her grandfather who gave it to both of us. I see her sometimes when I'm in Austin visiting Melissa. We go to dinner, the 3 of us, me and my daughter and my niece, who risked everything to do the right thing, and we talk about ordinary things, work and food and the weather and whatever game the Texans are losing. Sophie always asks about the cornbread. She thinks she might try making it herself. I told her I'd write down the recipe, though knowing this family I'd better make 3 copies. My brother and I have not spoken since the settlement was finalized. I don't expect that to change. 1. My brother. There are things that can be settled legally, and then there is the other kind of accounting, the one you do privately, for yourself, and I don't know what Gary's version of that looks like. I hope he's doing it. I hope somewhere in the life he's putting back together, he's sitting with what he did and what it cost. Not because I want him to suffer, but because a reckoning deferred is just a debt accumulating interest, and eventually it comes due one way or another. I visited my parents' graves alone last week. An October morning, cool enough for a jacket, the sky doing that thing Texas skies do in fall where the light turns everything amber and honest. I stood between my mother's stone and my father's, and I told them about the past year. About the settlement and the new house and the shoulder surgery. About Melissa's promotion and Sophie's new job. About the consulting work and the porch and the mornings that feel, lately, like something worth getting up for. I told my father I wasn't angry anymore. I've been working up to saying that for a long time, and I wanted to say it out loud, to the stone with his name on it, because I think some things need to be said to be true. I know you didn't mean for it to go this way, I told him. I know you thought you were doing the right thing. I think you were confused and tired, and somebody you trusted took advantage of that, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to stop it. The wind moved through the grass. A bird called somewhere nearby. I'm okay, Dad, I said. I want you to know that. I'm okay. I drive by the Reeves Energy Solutions facility sometimes. When I'm in that part of Beaumont, I don't go in. I don't need to. But I slow down and I look at the sign my father's name on it. 50 years of work made into something permanent, and I think about a man who came from Mississippi with $40 and the conviction that he could build something that would matter. He was right. He built it. It's still there. And his granddaughter, his blood, her grandfather's instinct in her hands and his stubbornness in her jaw is the reason any of us know the truth of what happened to it. There's a thing my father used to say when Gary and I were boys and the shop was having a hard stretch, a bad contract, equipment that needed replacing, the ordinary crises of a small business. He'd say it the same way every time, matter-of-factly, like it was simply a fact of the physical world he was reporting. This too shall pass, boys, and what comes after might surprise you. I didn't believe him when I was 12. I believed him less when I was 61, loading pallets in the dark. I believe him now. It's Sunday morning. I'm on the porch with my coffee and the amber light in the yard that needs attention but doesn't need it urgently. Melissa is coming for dinner tonight. She's bringing a friend she wants me to meet, which tells me the relationship is serious in a way she isn't ready to say directly, because she has always communicated important things sideways, a habit she got honestly from her father. I'm making cornbread, the right amount of buttermilk this time. And I think about that morning 3 years ago, the envelope in the parking lot, the trembling hands, the curb where I sat when my legs stopped working. I think about the night shifts and the bad shoulder and the 2 years of Sunday phone calls that went unanswered. I think about how certain I was, in the darkest of those mornings, that the story was over. It wasn't. It was barely halfway through. The thing about hitting the bottom is that it clarifies everything. The things that are real, and the things that only felt real. The people who were always with you, and the people who were with you only as long as it was convenient. You lose the comfort of ambiguity. It hurts, and then it becomes, gradually, a kind of gift. I know what I have now in a way I never did when I had more. I know the value of a daughter who makes the 4-hour drive. I know the weight of a 23-year-old who chooses her grandfather's integrity over her own comfort. I know what it means to watch the October light over a Texas yard and think, this is mine. I earned this. I almost didn't make it here. Ever. Gary said to our father's lawyer, after the settlement, that I should have found a way to let it go. That family doesn't go to court. That I'd made things harder than they needed to be. He was wrong. Some things are worth the difficulty. Some things, if you let them go, you lose something in yourself that you can't get back. I'm not sure I can explain it to someone who hasn't been there. The choice, on a parking lot curb in August heat, between the version of yourself who folds and the version who opens the envelope. Open the envelope. That's what I'd say to anyone in that parking lot, that curb, that dark, quiet apartment at 3 in the morning when the math won't work out. Open the envelope. Make the call. Take the meeting at the diner with the young woman who has your father's hands and the courage you didn't know was possible. You don't know what's in the envelope until you open it, and you never know who is out there, in an accounting office, with the numbers that prove you weren't wrong, waiting only for the right moment to find the courage to tell you. I hear Melissa's car in the driveway earlier than expected. She said 6 o'clock, and it's barely 4, which means the drive was easy or she was eager, and either way I'm glad. The cornbread is in the oven, the porch light is on, the yard still needs attention. I go inside to meet my daughter.